This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we just got a really dangerous message put forward by Donald Trump. I'm going to put his post right here on the screen. What's worse, the NBA players cheating at cards and probably much else, or the Democrats cheating on elections? The 2020 presidential election being rigged and stolen is a far bigger scandal. Look what happened to our country when a crooked moron became our president. We now know everything. I hope the DOJ pursues this with as much gusto as befitting the biggest scandal in American history. If not, it will happen again, including the upcoming midterms. No mail-in or early voting. Yes to voter ID. Watch how totally dishonest the California prop vote is. Millions of ballots being shipped. Get smart, Republicans, before it is too late. So, Mark, within what Donald Trump wrote here, there's a big indication of where his priorities are as we head toward this election and the midterm election cycle. So, first and foremost, what do you think the point is for him having posted something like this?
Oh, I think it's very clear what he's trying to do. I mean, number one, he's trying to tell Pam, remember her, who knows, maybe this was supposed to be a private message to her.
We'll find out from the Wall Street Journal later, yeah.
We'll find out from the Wall Street Journal. But notice, he says that he wants the Department of Justice to pursue with, quote, as much gusto as befitting the biggest scandal in American history. He's expecting that the Department of Justice is going to open criminal investigations into the 2020 elections. Now, this is not the first time he has said that. In fact, he has said that repeatedly, but it's about time the fucking legacy media started reporting this, rather than writing their both sides stuff. The president of the United States keeps saying over and over again, he wants a criminal investigation into people involved in the 2020 presidential election because he's lying about it. And he expects the Department of Justice to take that lie and turn it into indictments. So that's the first thing that's going on. The second thing going on here is something that is both old but also new, right? He has here said not only should there be no mail-in voting and there should be voter ID, but notice he has added to that list no early voting. Okay, so, when we think about how people vote in this country, there are three primary methods, right? There is voting by mail or absentee. There is election day in-person voting. And then in many, many places in this country, there is in-person early voting. And in-person early voting has been historically a way that states can both spread out over more time the voting process, meaning that they need to inconvenience fewer schools or public buildings or churches, wherever they put their polling locations. They can spread it out over a longer period of days, so they don't need more of those places, right? So it's been a huge success in red states and blue states. And here it is, he's taking it head on, saying no early voting. So what's left? He only wants people to vote on election day itself in person. Well, what is the population of that uses election day only voting? Republicans, right? I mean, we know that from the data. We know that was true in 2020, 2022, and it will be true and in 2024, and it will be true again, by the way, in these elections that we're having in California and New Jersey and Virginia. So the fact is, this is his way of trying to cut down on voting methods that he thinks Democrats will use in order to rig the outcome of the elections for 2026. And then finally, you note that he starts by tying the NBA players cheating at cards with Democrats cheating on elections. I think that obviously what he's trying to do is somehow connect the NBA and race politics into voting. I have a message for Donald Trump. The NBA and its players are a lot more popular than you are.
Okay, so my follow-up question here, recognizing that ultimately he wants to try and derive some benefit for himself in the upcoming elections, what kind of power and or influence will he have at trying to curb some of the laws that we have in place, allowing early voting, allowing mail-in voting, for example?
Look, I think the most immediate threat, I'm going to take them from biggest threat to lesser threat. The biggest threat we've got is that he controls the Department of Justice. And we're just not used to living in a country in which we say that about the President of the United States. We are used to saying that the Attorney General was appointed by the President and is typically of the same party, but we are not used to saying that the President of the United States directly controls the mechanics, which cases get filed, who gets investigated, who gets indicted, in the way in which we do right now about this Department of Justice. So the greatest risk is that he doesn't like the outcome of the California ballot initiative, which, by the way, he calls out here, right, which he has already said is dishonest, Right? You notice he's already declared that the California ballot initiative has been dishonest, even though we haven't yet gotten the results. And that should tell you something, right? That he is willing to use the Department of Justice to investigate and to tamper with. We know he's putting election monitors in California, right? We know DOJ is doing that. And so that's our biggest risk. And that's our biggest risk in 2025. It'll be our biggest risk in 2026, where they will either use the criminal process to investigate and prosecute his political enemies. We've already seen him do that, but we could see him doing it at scale to try to affect the outcome of the 2026 election. Or it's just that the Department of Justice gets deeply engaged in trying to subvert the will of the electorate, either by suing Democrat-controlled states, trying to overturn these kinds of voting methods, by challenging the outcome of elections, God forbid, or as we saw him wanting in 2020. Remember, in 2020, on December 16th, there was a meeting in the Oval Office of the White House in which he wanted to appoint Sidney Powell a special counsel to oversee the election, and he wanted the FBI to essentially seize the voting equipment and the ballots in
Georgia.
In Georgia. So, there's a lot that they can do there. That is our greatest risk. A little bit further down the scale, but not completely, something we should ignore, is his effort to use the Election Assistance Commission and other parts of the federal government to pressure states to drop these methods of voting. And remember, in some states, Republicans run the show. I mean, there's nothing that prevents the state of Florida from repealing early voting.
And not only runs the show, but their own Republican voters make use of the very methods of voting that Trump is right now attacking.
Right, but we could see him try to put pressure in the way that he has around mid-cycle redistricting on Republican states to repeal at least parts of the voting process, maybe in certain jurisdictions, maybe in certain, not entirely do away with early voting, but say, for example, every county can only have one early voting site. Well, what does that mean for a rural county versus what does that mean for a city? Right? I mean, there's all kinds of things that we may see him try to do, in what IDs are acceptable. We've already seen that gamesmanship where, concealed carry permits do count, college IDs don't count, right? So there's a lot of things that he can do using that power of persuasion and maybe even commandeering some state functions through some federal agencies.
Now, in terms of, him trying to say, get smart Republicans before it's too late, of course, there is the background that we've seen his previous DMs to Pam. What could the prospect of indictments do as we move forward in this process? Do you think that there's some chilling effect that he's trying to have by virtue of sicking his DOJ on officials who run elections in accordance with the law, or run elections where they use early voting or mail-in voting, or don't allow, whatever it may be, don't allow anything that he doesn't want to see?
Yeah. So let's talk about what is almost certainly going to happen, and then we can take a couple of steps from there. I think it is almost certainly the case that Prop 50 will pass. Now, every one of you who lives in California, that is not a reason not to vote. That's a reason to make sure you damn well vote and you do everything possible to get your ballot in, because we need it to pass, and pass by a wide margin, because it will have huge impacts in the psychology moving forward of redistricting and democracy reform. So please make sure you vote in that. But I think it's going to pass. And then, as sure as I sit here, Donald Trump is going to claim that there was fraud. Right? He sent these election monitors. That's going to play into his claims of fraud. He is already saying here that it has been that people need to watch because it is totally dishonest, and that millions of ballots being shipped. I don't even know what that means. Does he expect these ballots to all sit in a warehouse someplace and the voters all show up at the warehouse? Presumably, yes, there are millions of voters in California, therefore there are millions of ballots. And yes, the ballots have been shipped either by mail or to polling locations, whatever it is. But you can already see he's going to claim fraud in California. He'll probably claim fraud in New Jersey as well, but he's going to claim fraud in California. And then the question is, does he then order Pam? Hey, Pam, I hear that there is fraud in California, and Newsom and Schiff and Pelosi and, a player to be named later, is responsible, and you need to prove to everyone that we're not going to stand by this and you need to indict them, right? Like, I mean, that I don't know he's going to do, but it would not be out of the question for him to do that.
Right.
And so what does it mean for election officials if they see that if you run an honest election, Donald Trump is saying you should be investigated and indicted? I mean, he's saying that about 2020. What if he starts to say that about 2025? Like, so
right.
We all need to be on guard about this.
It's worth asking here, let's skip ahead and try to end on an optimistic note. In a perfect world,
we don't do a lot of optimism.
We don't do a lot of. We don't. That's not. We should. Well, let's take a foray into that right now. In a perfect world where we are fortunate enough to head into 26 or 28, let's say it's January 21st, 2029, and we have majorities in the House and the Senate and the White House. What does legislation look like that once and for all shores up a lot of the issues that Trump is right now trying to create to make voting and elections less secure and more favorable to Republicans? What does the ideal piece of legislation look like to once and for all shore up elections?
Look, I've been advocating about this for nearly my entire career. And in the last 4 or 5 years, it is almost the only thing I do is litigate in court to try to protect the right to vote and free and fair elections, prevent elections subversion, but also offer concrete suggestions that the Congress can adopt, that individual blue states can adopt. And let me just tell you something, Brian, we can't wait on Congress. We need some of these blue state governors to adopt these things today. What do those include? They include, simplifying and really, really strengthening the certification process. I understand we all love the pageantry of democracy with precincts sending in results and then county boards meeting on a bipartisan basis and then state boards meeting on a bipartisan basis. These bipartisan processes are being weaponized. We have seen what Republicans can do to try to undermine certification. We need to all revisit the certification process and make it absolutely clear that this is not an opportunity to subvert election results. This is an opportunity to ratify what the numbers say. That's number one. Number two, we need to harden the system of voting against claims that ballots of lawful voters shouldn't count. What do I mean by that? Too many states have these traps for the unwary. California still does signature matching. And I got to tell you, no Democratic state should be signature matching their mail-in ballots. I know this is not popular. They're going to get hate mail from people in California and certainly from Colorado, Oregon, and Washington state. But it is junk science what is used to match people's signatures. And every election, we are throwing away hundreds of thousands of ballots from lawful voters. But you know what else we're doing? We're giving Republicans a tool to claim even more votes should have been thrown out. And we need to just simplify and enfranchise voters. And one of the biggest ways we can do that, something that I'd call on every blue state to do, is pass a simple law that guarantees every citizen of their state a right to vote and have their vote counted, and not allow those ballots to anyone's vote to be denied, whether it's at the level of registration, whether it's showing up in polling place, or whether it's mail-in voting, unless the state is able to prove on their burden that the vote is somehow illegal or the voter was ineligible. The tie needs to go to the voter, and we need to stop prioritizing these antiquated processes that, like I said, Republicans have used to go after voters. I can add to that, doing away with, by the way, voter challenges. No one should be allowed to disenfranchise you because they don't think you should be allowed to vote. If the state, we have to deal with state voter purges and other things states could tighten up, but we certainly should not allow third party right-wing voter challenges by vigilante organizations.
We'll leave it there. Obviously, for everybody watching, you can see the extent to which this kind of analysis is absolutely what is needed right now. So a small step that we can all take to elevate Mark's voice in this ecosystem, which could not be more important, especially in light of the failings of legacy media and the extent to which they are not willing to really meet these challenges head on, but rather just engage in the same tired both sidesism that landed us here in the first place. Small step we can all take is to support Democracy Docket, which is the news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting elections. It's a resource that I use on a daily basis, so if you're not yet signed up, please make sure to go ahead and sign up. Support not just the work that Mark and his team are doing on the front lines in the courts where it matters most, but in fixing a lot of the issues that we have in the media ecosystem as well. So I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. If you're not yet subscribed to this channel and want to see more episodes of Democracy Watch, you can find that link on the screen as well. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.